Okay, welcome to your next project. So this is a pretty simple project, at least in terms of the JavaScript. It's only like 5 lines or so. Basically, we just need to add an event listener to this icon right here, and once we click it, we're gonna toggle an active class, and it's active right now. But when I click it, you'll see what happens is a couple things really. This container here, the nav, shrinks. The links start to rotate, and then they ultimately disappear, setting the opacity to 0. And then the X does a rotation and then turns into 2 lines. Okay, so it's a pretty cool effect, and you could use this on any website or application. We're going to be doing mostly CSS here. As you can see, we have quite a few transitions that are going to come into play when we toggle the active class, which is what we're doing when we click this. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. All right, guys, we're going to get started on our animated navigation project. So I just have my boilerplate here, my project starter, and I just included the dribble link to the graphic in case you're interested. I also wanted to give them credit. So we'll start off here with the title, animated navigation, and the HTML is going to be pretty simple. So we want to get rid of that and have a nav tag that's going to wrap everything. Now, the way that this animation is going to work is when we click this, this is in the state of active. So basically we'll have a class of active on the nav. When we click that, in the JavaScript, it's going to remove that class, and we have a bunch of transitions to give it that effect. Okay, we have this stretching, we have this disappears, the opacity. Also, you can see the links are rotating as well, and the X turns into lines. So we're going to add a bunch of transitions for those. But this nav tag is going to start with a class of active because we want it to be open when it starts. And we'll give this an ID of nav as well to grab onto it in the JavaScript. So in here, let's add our UL and then our LI with an A tag that just goes nowhere. Say home, and then we'll have 4 links. This next one will be works, and then we'll do about, and then we'll do contact. Okay, underneath the UL, we're going to have a button. So this button is going to have a class of icon, and give it an ID of toggle. Okay, so this button is this right here, the X. But inside here, you see how we have 2 lines, right? So we want these 2 lines. So I'm going to do a class of line, and we want 2 of these, so we'll add that. Now we need a way to differentiate these because they're going to be rotating differently in the transitions. So let's call this one line 1 and this one line 2. And that should be it for the HTML. So this is what it's going to look like, very ugly. So let's jump into our styling, and we're going to use a different font here. We just want CSS, and then replace this with MULI, Muli, I don't know how to pronounce it. And then we'll add that here. Okay, now for the background, we're going to put a solid color here, but then under it we'll do a linear gradient. And I'm putting both just in case linear gradient isn't supported. So this will be hexadecimal, and it'll be EAFBFF. Okay, so like a very light blue. And then we'll have a background image, and for this we're going to use a linear gradient, and we'll do the direction will be to bottom, and then we'll use this color here. So I'm going to paste in that color. We want that at 0%, and then we'll put a comma here. We'll paste in that color again, and we want it to go to 50. So from 0% to 50%, we'll have that color, and then we want this color, this blue, which is 5290F9, and we want that to be from 50% to 100%. So just grab this, and right here we want this to go to 100%. If I save that, we get that split color look. Now let's see, what else do we have here? Do we want display flex? We don't need column, display column, and get rid of that. We can also get rid of the overflow hidden. Overflow hidden, and I'm just going to add margin 0. I probably should have put that in the boilerplate. So that's it for the body. Now let's start on the nav here. So let's take the nav tag and let's add a background. We'll add a background color of white. Okay, and I'm just going to add 20 pixels padding all the way around, and the width of this is going to be 80%, but that's in, I'm sorry, 80 pixels, but that's in the non-active state. So basically this, when it's active, it's going to be 350 pixels, and it's active to begin with. Okay, we have the class active here. So let's just jump down here real quick and say if it has the active class on it, then let's set the width to 350 pixels like that. All right, and then I just want to center everything here. So the nav will go ahead and display flex. We want to align items to the center, and we want to justify content to the center. And let's actually add a border radius of 3 pixels. And we're also going to have a box shadow. So for the X offset, we'll do 0, the Y will do 2 pixels, the blur will do 5 pixels, and the color will be RGBA black with a 0.3 transparency. So it just looks like it's slightly coming off the page. Now, when we remove the active class, so if I just manually get rid of this here, you can see it shrinks down. Now I want to add a transition on that. I don't want it to just flick right to, you know, smaller or bigger. I want to have a nice smooth transition. So let's add a transition. So this will take whatever property we want to add the transition to, which in this case is the width, the duration I want it to last, which is 0.6 seconds, and the effect, which is linear. It's going to be the same speed throughout. All right, so now let's start to do the UL, the unordered list. So we'll say nav UL, and for this I'm going to display flex, which makes it a flex container, makes all the list items flex items that will turn into a row. We want to get rid of any bullets, so list style type, we're going to set that to none. And then let's go ahead and just remove any default margin and padding. Oops. Okay, and then what else do we want to do here? So the width for this, the initial width is going to be 0, and the reason for that is when it's not active, we want the width of it to be 0. All right, now we want to add a transition for the width here too. So let's say transition on the width, and it's going to be 0.6 seconds linear. Now when it's active, let's say when the nav tag has a class of active, which it does now, we want the width of the UL to be 100%. Oh, sorry, I'm going to put UL here. Okay, so we'll have the width at 100%, and then I think that's all we want there. So let's do the list items. So we have our nav UL list items, and remember we want them to have that rotate effect. So what we'll do is we'll use transform, and we can use rotate on the y-axis, and start here with 0 degrees, and I'm going to change that for the active state. But we'll go ahead and add that, and by default the opacity is going to be 0, which is going to make it just disappear, and that's fine because we only want it to show when it has the active state. And then I want to add a transition for the transform property for the rotate, because we want it to have that smooth rotation. You can see the LIs have that rotate, and also for the opacity, you can see how they fade in and out nice and smooth. So what we'll do is add transition on transform, and let's do 0.6 seconds linear, and then I'll also add it onto the opacity property, which will be 0.6 seconds duration and linear. Alright, and then let's see. So when it's active, we should see it. So let's say nav active, and we want to target the LI when the nav is active and set the opacity to 1 so we can see it. And then we also want to set the transform to rotate Y, and we're going to do 360 degrees. We just wanted to do a full 360 spin. You can see when I save, it actually shows us the transition, or the rotation, I should say. Alright, now the links don't look too good, so let's make those look a little better. So we'll say nav ULA, and we want to position these to be relative, and the color of the links I'm going to set to black, and I'm going to get rid of any underlines. So text decoration, what is this? Text decoration, we want that to be none, and then I'm just going to separate them with a margin on the right and left of 10 pixels. Okay, that looks much better. Alright, so I think what we'll do is stop here, and then in the next video we'll go ahead and style the icon, or the button with the class of icon, put the lines in there, and we're going to add the rotation transform for that, and then we'll add the JavaScript with the event listener. Alright, so we'll get to that next. Alright, in the last video we went ahead and created most of the styling. We have our background gradient, we have our little nav bar here. Now we want to do the icon, which is a button with the class of icon. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll add in icon, and we're going to set the background color to white, which is the same as its container there. And then we want to get rid of that border as well. So we'll set that border to 0. So now we essentially can't see anything. And then we're going to set the cursor to a pointer so that when we hover over it, we get that cursor. We want to set any padding to 0. We're going to position this relative because the lines inside are going to be positioned absolute, and we're going to set the height and the width both to 30 pixels. Alright, and we can't see anything just yet. One thing that I want to get rid of is this outline on the focus state. So we'll say icon : focus, and we want to set the outline to 0. Okay, now we want to style the lines. Remember, there's 2 divs inside the button with the class of line, so we want to style that. So let's say icon line, and we'll set the background color, and we'll set that to hexadecimal 5290F9, and we want to set the height, so they're just going to be 2 lines, so we'll set 2 pixels to the height. So we have 2 pixel lines. Now we want to position this to be absolute, and actually let's put our width as well. So the width is going to be 20 pixels, and we position absolute. Now we want to move this from, let's say, from the top 10 pixels, and from the left 5 pixels. So this is the top line. Now both of them are in the same exact spot right now because they both have the class of line, which we just put in the same position. So what I'm going to do is right underneath, let's say icon, and then we want to take line 2 and we want to move it down. So we can actually use auto for the top, and from the, let's say from the bottom, 10 pixels. Okay, so now we have 2 separate lines. Now up here, let's see, what else do we want to add? We want to add a transition. Actually, we'll wait. We'll do the transition after. Let's do the rotate. So remember, when we click it, when it goes from an X to the 2 lines, we want them to rotate. So we're going to go down here, and they need to rotate in different directions. So we want to say nav, and when it's active, We want to take icon and we want line 1 first. So let's take line 1 and let's add a transform so that we can rotate, and the degrees is we're going to do a negative 765 degree rotation, and we also need to add translate Y for the positioning, and that's going to be 5.5 pixels. Alright, and then what I'll do is just copy this whole thing, and this is going to be for line 2, and this is going to be positive 765 degrees, and then this will be negative because we want them to go, you know, in a different way. So save that, and now we have an X. Now when it changes, we need to have a transition. So let's go back up to here to the line class, and let's add a transition. We want to put it on the transform property. Everything is 0.6 seconds. Of course, you can change that if you'd like. Linear. And you can see when I save and that's applied, you can see the rotation. So the last thing we have to do now is the JavaScript, which is very, it's only, I think, like 6 lines. Basically, we just need an event listener on this button so that when we click it, the active class is toggled. So let's go to our script and let's say const toggle and set that to document dot, and we're going to use get element by ID to pull in the ID of toggle, which is the button, right? So we have this ID of toggle, so we're grabbing that. We also want to grab the nav by this ID. So let's say const nav document dot get element by ID, and we want the nav. Okay, and then what we're going to do is take the toggle and we're going to add an event listener onto it because we want to listen for a click. So pass in click, and then we have a function which you can write out like this, or you can use an arrow function, which is what I prefer. So we can get rid of that and then just add an arrow. Okay, and then we're going to take the nav and we're simply going to toggle the active class, meaning that if it's applied, it'll remove it. If it's not applied, it will add it. So let's take class list, and class list you can do add if you want to add a class, you can do remove to remove one, or you can do toggle, which is what we want. And we want to toggle the active class. Alright, now with arrow functions, if we only have one single line like this in the function body, we don't even need these curly braces. We can just do that. I mean, you don't have to, but I don't know, it's shorter, it's cleaner. So let's try this out. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to click this, and there we go. So all the transitions are applied, including the rotation of the icon, the rotation and the opacity of the links. You can see they spin and they fade in and out. The width of the container here. So all these transitions are applied when that class is added and removed. All right, so that's pretty much it. Pretty simple project. You could integrate this into your website or your app, your mobile app, whatever it is that that you want to use it with. But that's it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next project.